It's great to be here at Woodford, particularly with my colleague Wyatt Roy, who's the member for Longman. You know, Wyatt, actually, he's got something in common with Bob Hawke, who's also here today. Wyatt and Bob Hawke are the exceptions to the rule that politics is show business for ugly people. And it's good. It's good to see it, but I don't know whether Wyatt. I don't know whether you'll be as handsome as Bob is at his age. But he's looking fantastic. Where are you, Bob? There he is. There he is. Good. There he is. Well, that's very good. Now, as far as prominent Sydney racing identities, of course, there's no more prominent one than Hawkeye, I would say. But in Sydney, that's not always regarded as actually colourful Sydney racing identity is the one you don't want to be described as. Now, look, I'm going to talk for a little while and not too long, although whenever a politician says that, you shouldn't believe him. But I'm going to talk for a little while so we've got plenty of time for questions. And I want to just say a little bit about what I regard as Republican virtues. Now, this is not simply talking about why Australia should be a republic. Most of you have heard me make that argument many times in the past. But one of the great Republican virtues that the founders of the American Republic were very committed to, Thomas Jefferson and others, was the obligation on people in public life to inform. And they saw that the antidote to tyranny, the thing that would overthrow tyranny, was education and information. And Thomas Jefferson extolled that in his own writings, and it's there enshrined on the walls of the university founded in Virginia. And this is a point that I've come to a few times in the last year as we've seen the standard of debate in politics decline, and we've seen all too often, all of us, and I'm not suggesting that any of us are innocent of this, but all of us in politics have found ourselves drawn into more and more negativity, more and more of the game of politics. The game of politics as opposed to the responsibility of dealing with the big issues of our time. And indeed, in many respects, there's plenty of blame to go around, and as I say, I'll take a more than ample share of it myself. But you know, it has never been easier in the they call it the 24-hour news cycle. It's not a 24-hour news cycle. It is a 60-second news cycle now. It's instantaneous. It has never been easier for people in public life, not just politicians, but journalists and business leaders and the pundits and so forth. It has never been easier to get away with telling lies. It has never been easier to get away with the glib one-liner. And I say to you, that people, whether they are broadcasters or politicians or writers, who think that they are respecting Struggle Street, the battlers, whatever epithet they want to use, by dumbing things down into one-line sound bites, are not respecting them. They are treating them with contempt. Because it is our job. It is our job, above all in politics, to tackle the big issues and to explain them and have the honesty to say to people there are no easy solutions here. If it was, you know, if the answer to global warming was obvious and simple, we'd have it licked by now. Huge challenges, complex problems. We've got to be prepared to treat the public with respect, lay out those issues honestly and factually, and deal in facts and not spin. And that is the big challenge, because I believe, and I say Bob's been around a little bit longer than me, but I believe it has never been worse. And it's not just in our country, it is probably worst of all in the United States. And I'll give you an example. In the last presidential election, the Romney campaign ran an ad of Obama, which had a grab of Obama, which had him showing, Obama faced a camera saying, if we keep talking about the economy, we're finished. And they ran that and said, there it is, that's Obama expressing his views. What Obama's remarks were from was an interview he'd done in 2008, where he'd said, the McCain campaign are so at sea, they are now starting to say, if we keep talking about the economy, we're finished. And so flagrant. And when Romney's top pollster, his top strategist, was hauled up about this, he said to the New York Times, absolutely shamelessly, we are not going to let our campaign be dictated to by fact checkers. Now, of course, Governor Romney got what he deserved, I suppose. He got thoroughly thrashed. But you know, we need to have, one of the things we should be resolving to do, and I'd love to see this happening if there are any budding web entrepreneurs here. I'm sure there's more than a few here. One of the things we need in Australia is a rigorous fact-checking website, maybe a few of them, because we need all of our public figures to be held to account. And it is a disgrace how much misinformation is got away with. Now, there's plenty of examples I'm sure you'll be able to identify from right across the Parliament, but you'll understand why I only identify one, and that I thought I should do so out of deference to the great state of Queensland. I should identify Wayne Swan. It's a good example. Wayne, but you may remember at the end of 2008, when the global financial crisis was really hitting in a big way, there was a panic on, and a number of European countries passed laws to guarantee their banks' borrowings, their wholesale borrowings. And we did the same in Australia. And not only did we agree to it, but we actually voted for the legislation to make it happen. In fact, a longer story, but the legislation wouldn't have been passed had I not encouraged the government to do it. I was the leader of the opposition at the time. But again and again, Wayne has stood up in the Parliament and said, when the time came to give the guarantee to the banks, the coalition voted against it, even though we did, and we picked him up on that half a dozen times. Never gets reported, because the media have got to the point where they are so cynical about politics that they do not expect politicians to tell the truth. And so if politicians are not being held to account, why would they bother? What is the incentive for them to tell the truth? Well, of course, there should always be an incentive to tell the truth, which is doing the right thing by the electorate. But that has to be, truth-telling and responsibility have to be a key undertaking, a New Year's resolution for each and every one of us in our federal and our state parliaments in 2013. Now, the reason why it is so important, not just from a moral point of view, the reason why it is so important is that the challenges we face are more profound than they have been for many, many years. I'm not suggesting we're facing the challenges that John Curtin faced or anything like that, but the world is changing so rapidly. And we have to ask ourselves this question. This is the fundamental question, I think, for Australians and Australian leaders today, is how do we, in the face of a converging world, when I say a converging world, I mean a world where we are no longer looking at low-wage economies competing for low-skilled jobs and low-skilled manufacturers, but we're now competing in a global marketplace with lower-wage countries which have very high skills, often higher than ours. And the internet technology is amplifying that process of convergence. So the world we're living in, the world that we're growing up in and staking our future in, is one that is more competitive than ever. And it is also less predictable. Most of the technology we are absolutely wedded to and take for granted was barely imaginable a decade ago. Facebook didn't exist a decade ago. Twitter didn't exist a decade ago. Google barely existed a decade ago. All of these fundamental elements in our lives. I mean, the internet was not operating in a commercial sense when Bob Hawke was Prime Minister. And that wasn't so long ago. So we are talking about extraordinary change. And how do we equip ourselves to deal with that? The one thing we have to recognise, and this is the challenging thing, is that we have to ensure that Australia is as well educated, as innovative, as technologically advanced, and above all as flexible as we possibly can be. We have to be what Nassim Taleb has called in his most recent book, anti-fragile. And let me explain that. Things that are fragile are things that are rigid and cannot withstand shocks, that require stability. And we all, too many of us perhaps, all of us yearn for stability. We want things to stay the same. We want to avoid disruptive change. We have to rethink our approach. We have to recognise that we are in a dynamically changing environment, whether we like it or not. So our posture has to be one where we acquire the quality of anti-fragility, so that not only can we say that that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger, we have to say that every knock, every reverse, every failure is not a defeat, is not a setback, but is something from which we learn and which enables us to do better.